It was a dark and stormy night, and the wind howled like a pack of wolves as it whipped through the barren trees that surrounded the old mansion on the hill. The mansion had been abandoned for years, and it was said that strange things happened there. But that didn't stop a group of teenagers from daring each other to spend the night inside. The group consisted of 5 friends: Emily, Jack, Sarah, Alex, and Marcus. They had been planning this adventure for weeks and had brought enough food, water, and supplies to last them the night. As they entered the mansion, they couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The interior of the mansion was dark and musty, and the furniture was covered in cobwebs. The group split up to explore the different rooms, each hoping to find something interesting or exciting. But as they wandered through the maze-like halls, they began to realize that something wasn't right. Emily, who had been exploring the upstairs bedrooms, suddenly heard a faint whispering coming from behind one of the doors. She hesitated for a moment before pushing it open, only to find an empty room. But as she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye. It was a shadowy figure hovering in the corner of the room. Emily froze, unable to move as the figure slowly began to move towards her. She could feel its cold breath on her neck as it whispered in her ear, but she couldn't make out what it was saying. Emily stumbled backwards, tripping over a piece of furniture and falling to the ground. As she scrambled to her feet, she realized that the figure had vanished. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, but the fear in her heart told her otherwise. Meanwhile, Jack had been exploring the basement. The air down there was thick and suffocating, and the smell of mildew and decay made him gag. As he moved deeper into the basement, he heard the sound of footsteps echoing through the darkness. At first, he thought it was one of his friends playing a prank on him. But as the footsteps grew closer, he realized that it was something else entirely. Something that didn't belong in this world. The footsteps grew louder and louder until they were right behind him. Jack spun around, but there was no one there. He could feel the hot breath of something breathing down his neck, but when he turned around, he saw nothing. Suddenly, a pair of icy hands grabbed him from behind, pulling him into the darkness. Jack screamed as he felt himself being dragged further and further away from his friends. He tried to fight back, but it was no use. Whatever was holding him was too strong. As the rest of the group searched for Jack and Emily, they began to realize that something was seriously wrong. They could feel a malevolent presence lurking in the shadows, watching their every move. Sarah, who had been exploring the dining room, suddenly felt a cold breeze on her face. She turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, its eyes glowing like hot coals. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her throat. The figure began to move towards her, its long fingers outstretched like claws. Sarah tried to run, but her legs felt like lead. The figure caught up to her, its icy breath on her neck as it whispered in her ear. And then everything went black. When Sarah woke, she was alone in the mansion. Her friends were nowhere to be found. She stumbled through the dark hallways, calling out their names, but there was no response. As she moved deeper into the mansion, she began to notice strange symbols etched into the walls. They looked like ancient runes, and she couldn't help but feel that they held some kind of significance. She made a mental note to ask her friends about them if she ever saw them again. After what felt like hours of wandering, Sarah stumbled upon a hidden room. The door was partially ajar, and she could see a faint glow emanating from within. She cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. What she saw made her blood run cold. Her friends were there, but they were not themselves. Their eyes were glazed over, and their skin was ashen. They stood in a circle, chanting in a language that Sarah couldn't understand. As Sarah approached them, they turned to face her, their eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. They began to move towards her, their arms outstretched like zombies. Sarah tried to run, but they were too fast. She felt something cold wrap around her ankle, and she fell to the ground. The group closed in around her, their chanting growing louder and more frenzied. Sarah could feel the life being drained from her body, like they were feeding on her energy. But then something miraculous happened. A beam of light shone down from the ceiling, illuminating the room in a warm glow. The group recoiled from the light, as if it burned them. Sarah seized the opportunity to crawl away towards the door. As she reached recite the runes she had seen on the walls. To her surprise, the runes seemed to have a power of their own. As she spoke them, the light grew brighter and more intense. The group fell to their knees, their bodies racked with pain. Sarah could feel the energy draining from her, but she didn't stop. She continued to recite the runes until the group had been purged of whatever dark force had possessed them. When it was over, Sarah collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Her friends lay beside her, unconscious but unharmed. As the light faded, the runes on the walls vanished, leaving no trace of their power behind. The group eventually made their way out of the mansion and into the safety of the stormy night. They never spoke of what happened inside those walls again, but they knew that they had experienced something beyond explanation. As for the mansion, it remained abandoned, a beacon of terror and mystery to those who passed by. But some say that on dark and stormy nights, when the wind howls like a pack of wolves, you can still hear the whispers of the